Hey everybody, welcome back to Ready Steady Play. I'm Mike Dennis, and today I'm just going to talk a bit about Clank. This is going to be a brief introduction to what the game is like and the rules and stuff, so that you can follow along with my playthrough tomorrow, where I'm going to be joined by my friend Graham, and we're going to be delving into the dungeon of Nikki the Dragon. However, if you want to see a more comprehensive rule summary, be sure to check out our rules and setup video, which I'll be posting later today. Clank is a 2 to 4 player deck building game that takes around 60 minutes by designer Paul Dennen and published by Renegade Games. The game has each player take on the role of adventurers delving into a dungeon. I say adventurers in the loosest sense of the word. In this game, you're more like thieves. In fact, more than half the cards in your starting deck are called Burgle. So let's take a look at the board and the starting decks. There are two boards that come in Clank. This is in fact double-sided. This is the basic version of the board, and you can tell because all four marketplace tiles are in the center here. There are really just three different kinds of rooms on this board. You've got crystal caverns, regular dungeon rooms, and the marketplace rooms. There is also this special monkey idol room. The game has you take on the role of adventurers, represented by these cool little meeples here, and you'll be putting them up here at the top of the castle. They'll be adventuring down through the castle, traveling through the rooms, with the objective of getting to these chambers down here, which are below the surface in the depths. In the depths, you'll be acquiring powerful artifacts, and the minute you grab one, you'll be required to get out to safety. If you take too long, then the dragon will kill you. If your friend gets out, and you spend too long hanging around in the dungeon, the dragon will kill you. So there's a real sense of urgency. At its heart, it really is a sort of a push-your-luck game where the length of the game is determined by the audacity of the players. All of the victory points in the game are represented by these green symbols. And these are artifacts. You cannot win the game without an artifact because you can't leave the dungeon until you get one. At the end of the game, whoever has the most victory points is, of course, the winner. I guess really you're a thief, but you want, in the eyes of the people, to be regarded as a mighty hero who's accomplished great things. But we're not here to kill the dragon. We know we've accomplished great things because we have the shiniest bling. In order to acquire this bling, you'll have a deck of 10 cards that you start with. Each of these cards allows you to take different actions in the dungeon, and on your turn you'll play 5 of them, giving you a different set of things you can do. Playing these cards is essentially kind of resource management. We've got Burgle cards with a single blue diamond on them. This represents skill points, and it's the currency with which you buy more cards. We've also got 2 stumble cards. These only generate clank, which means they are purely bad. Unfortunately, on your turn, you'll have to play every card in your deck, which means you'll have to play these stumbles if you draw them. We've also got a scramble and a sidestep. Sidestep has a boot on it, which is the second kind of resource your deck will generate, and boots are very, very important. These allow you to move around the dungeon. We've also got Scramble here, which has a boot and a skill resource on it. So here we've got a massive deck of dungeon cards. These dungeon cards represent the contents of the dungeon into which we will be adventuring. We'll start with 6 of these cards face up on the board. These represent a marketplace from which we can purchase items. There's also going to be monsters in this deck that we can fight. Later, as we progress through the game, we'll buy cards for our deck to enhance it, and these cards contain characters with swords on. These swords can be used to defeat monsters and move safely through passages on the board that contain monsters. We'll be putting these cards into our deck with the hope of drawing better and better hands each round, allowing us to go further into the dungeon, ultimately with the purpose of gaining better and shinier loot, but only better and shinier loot than our allies. It turns out that the people of this land will be impressed by just about anything, provided it's shinier than the next adventurer thief guy's stuff. As the game progresses, we'll be buying these cards and putting them into our personal deck. We'll need to replenish the stockpile by drawing cards off the top of the dungeon deck. When you turn over a card like this monster here, the kobold, or a card like this loot here, the sapphire, with this dragon symbol on it, that means the dragon wakes up and attacks. so you don't want to get hurt by the dragon. Well, that's the very nature of Clank. We've got on the board here this area called the Clank pool. Now, in this Clank pool, we'll be putting little cubes associated with our player color. So if I'm the blue man here, and I'm heading off into the dungeon, every time I make noise by going through the dungeon, which is called Clank, I guess to represent the heavy armor that I'm wearing, I'll be putting these cubes here into this Clank pool. Eventually, these Clanks will be put into this bag here. This is the dragon bag. It represents Nikki the dragon. I guess that's her on the front. And when Clank goes in the dragon bag, it means that we've disturbed her slumber and she's woken up and she's stalking us through the halls of the dungeon. We're going to draw Clank back out of the bag equal to a number here on her rage track. And when we get in, if we draw any of our own cubes, like this one here, we'll put it down on our track to represent damage that we've taken. When we've taken enough damage, we are dead. If we die here underground in the depths, we're out of the game. But if we die here in the top half of the dungeon, some townsfolk will come and rescue us. However, it's not very noble and it's not very heroic, so if that happens, we won't get bonus points for being masters of the dungeon. Because remember, this is all about looking good and having the shiniest stuff. Or rather, it's about looking better than your friends. And if they got out of the dungeon, they look a lot better than you. If you successfully leave the dungeon, you enter this death track. I call it a death track because if you get to the end of it, anyone left in the dungeon is killed. Now, if they are in the upper level, they will be rescued by the townsfolk, but if they're in the depths, they'll be eliminated from the game, and no matter who has the most points, they lose. As you progress along this track, the dragon will attack at the end of every round, regardless of what cards appear from the dungeon deck. In addition to that, you'll draw Clank cubes equal to the rage track plus the number here below, which means that really your opponents have very few turns to get out of the dungeon before they're almost assuredly killed. So I've also got Clank Sunken Treasures. And what Clank Sunken Treasures adds to the game is a new board, actually, 2 new boards, one of which is an awesome pirate ship. It adds a few other bits and pieces and some more dungeon cards. So this is the board for Sunken Treasures. This is the dungeon side. This is the pirate ship side. And you can see we've still got the above ground part and the depths here, but now a whole bunch of tiles are submerged underwater. You can get scuba gear that allows you to move around the board freely, or you can duck in and out of these rooms holding your breath and taking damage if you fail to go above water on your turn. What this adds is just more considerations as you move through the dungeon, making paths more difficult and more perilous. It also adds these little Clank symbols here on the board, which means you add Clank to the Clank pool as you move through certain corridors, presumably representing you splashing into the water and things like that. So that's pretty much the introduction to Clank done. You're going to draw 5 cards on your turn. You play them all. You get to do a certain number of things based on what you drew, and then you're going to discard those and draw more. If you're familiar with deck builders, this will be a very familiar mechanic to you. What makes Clank interesting is the way in which it interacts with the board and the Clank tokens that come up. So if you're interested to see how the game plays, be sure to come back tomorrow for our playthrough. If you want to know more about the rules, the specifics of the rules, I'll be explaining all of that in a longer video later today, so be sure you come back and check that out too. Thanks for watching!